All right, welcome on into week one, episode one of Bama News. I'm your host, Simone Eli, sports anchor WKRG down in Mobile, alongside my co-host, Patrick Greenfield, doing all the things, not only on camera, but also behind the scenes. Patrick,
Hello.
Excited to get this started. It's game week, man. Bama, Miami. Does it get any better than this?
It does not. I'm very excited for football. I was excited. I was watching UAB and watching Boise State tonight. I'm watching Alabama on Saturday, going all the way through Labor Day with college football. So I want to thank everybody for watching this show. It's a new show, interactive. We want you to answer questions. We want you to give your predictions. So we're going to get into that. But I'll throw it back to you, Simone. And
yeah, we're super excited. Week one, Saturday's kickoff at 2:30, of course, in Atlanta, Bama and Miami, number 1 versus number 14. We're going to get into probably 4 main topics that we have to discuss today. And to do that, we're going to bring in our first guest. He is very well known on this channel, Mike Rodak, the Bama beat reporter for AL.com. Mike, thanks so much for joining us, man. It feels like this offseason was longer than most. Fall camp just felt longer, but it's finally game week, man.
Yeah, it's true, although a little bit of a shorter offseason than last year. Remember, we had to wait until September 26th last year and just kind of watching all those other conferences play. And now it's actually feels like back to normal in terms of Labor Day weekend and the start of football.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys. So we pretty much have 4 main topics. We'll do this every single week. And the big one today going into game week against Miami is, of course, the quarterback play. When you look at Bryce Young, who's been the backup for the last year over in Tuscaloosa, Derek King, who has been successful at every level, not only in Houston, but also at Miami until he was injured in the bowl game last year. When you look at these two guys, the NIL situation that we've dealt with throughout this offseason just stands out to me. I was talking to Patrick about this yesterday. These are 2 guys who are raking in, we're talking almost 7 figures. Now they're going to go head to head in the first game of the season, Mike. It's hard to not ignore how that plays a role in such a big, hard-hitting game.
Yeah, exactly. And to me, the biggest discrepancy there is that you have a really experienced guy in Derek King, as you can see. 36 starts compared to Bryce, 0. A guy who's kind of been around the block. This is his last year. Manny Diaz has been in Miami a little while now. This is probably the biggest game that he's had just to make his mark and to really make some noise across the country. And you have to imagine Miami's just going to kind of let it all hang out and just try to win this game however they can. I don't think they're going to be holding back Derek King at all. I don't think they're going to be holding back on defense. Whereas with Alabama, this is kind of getting their feet wet with Bryce Young. It's his first start. A lot of new faces around him on offense and a new play caller in Bill O'Brien. So I don't know if they're going to be coming out of the gate like what we saw with Alabama's offense last year with Steve Sarkisian, the whole all gas, no brakes, and taking all the chances downfield that they did. It might be something a little bit more guarded as they try to get Bryce Young accustomed to being the starter. But again, when you're going up against a team that really has nothing to lose in Miami, if they lose this game, they're down to really their last chance this season. They would have to beat North Carolina. It would have to beat everybody else in their schedule to get to the playoffs. So you have a difference, I think, in how teams approach it. But at the end of the day, it's going to be about the quarterbacks and just how far along is Bryce Young? Is he far enough along that he can outplay Derek King essentially?
No doubt. Patrick, for you, do you feel like there's an added level of pressure on Bryce Young, not only to deliver? Does the NIL situation play any role in what's the pressure that he already has on him being the starting quarterback at Alabama?
I don't think the NIL has really anything to do. Obviously, anybody that Nick Saban grooms, recruits at that level is going to be able to kind of take this pressure. I don't think it's a big game for him. I'm actually more worried about King facing the Alabama defense. He has an NIL deal with the NHL team, the Florida Panthers, which is a pretty interesting NIL deal in itself. But I think he's going to have way more pressure to come back from injury to come back and face Alabama in Bryant-Denny East. Bryce Young's going to be able – the only thing that Bryce Young has to worry about is managing the game and going to his go-tos, which is now JoJo Earl, correct?
Yeah, JoJo Earl, the freshman receiver who came in. He wasn't even here in spring camp, game here, and then he had rolled during the summer, and he's looking like one of their top 4 guys. So yeah, he's one of the guys who he's going to. But I'll say this: I've been impressed with Bryce just in the couple times that we've talked to him, and this is really the first time I've let him be in front of the camera. And he definitely seems like he's poised with us, that he's comfortable. Like you said, there is this expectation with him that he's this $1 million quarterback, and I think part of that was Saban's fault and just putting that number out there. And
he did too.
Yeah, and I don't think that.
Hey man, recruiting tools. I don't mind it.
Right, and I think part of it is it was at this coaches convention. I don't think he really knew that there were reporters there that were going to make that a big
He
deal.
had to have known. Come on, Nick Saban knows.
Doesn't do anything on accident. That is for sure. The guy rarely makes mistakes.
You have a kid at Ohio State now who's making more than either of these guys. Right?
I think it might have been
1.4.
accidental, but I think there were certainly some benefits to him putting it out there. But at the end of the day, like, yeah, you're putting a lot of pressure on Bryce Young when you put that out there. Sure. But I think he's handled it well, at least from what I've seen. For headspace wise, he seems to be really handling that part of it.
Yeah,
I'd be really curious, Mike, do you think his size has anything to do? And obviously this is an interactive show, so I'd ask the audience, press like, press subscribe, but also who do you think has more pressure, D'Eriq King or Bryce Young? But do you think his size, he is a little bit smaller than a lot of college quarterbacks at that 5-star level?
Yeah, I think that plays into it. I think we just need to see him take some hits. And I mean, he took a few last year. I mean, he had actually was sacked 6 times, which for the amount that he was on the field was not a good number. But to play, a full game and a full season, he's going to have to show that he can hold up physically. That's certainly a question with him. And even Mac. I mean, Mac's a taller, kind of thicker guy. And remember, by the end of that Ohio State game, he was pretty banged up. He limped off the field, in fact, after he kind of handed the keys over to Bryce Young in the fourth quarter there. Yeah. You got to hold up. It's SEC. You're playing a pretty tough Miami defense, and that certainly be part of it.
Yeah, I think David Cole makes a good point here. Appreciate that comment, saying, King is just 9 months removed from an ACL injury, which is a huge, significant injury, especially for a dual threat quarterback. We're not talking about a guy who just sits in the pocket and doesn't move very often. He's a guy who had 729 rushing yards last year, makes plays with his feet, extends plays in the passing game. Could that play an impact on what he looks like? Obviously, he's not going to be out on the field if he's not good to go. But you always have that in the back of your mind. As a former athlete, when you have an injury, you think about that. It's not something that you just let go. If you got a brace on there, you think about the last time that you played full contact. This will be the first time that he's played full contact, full speed since that injury.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's a good point. To be honest, I sort of forgotten about that, obviously, with the off season, for Miami, but I have been watching a little bit of the ACC network show that's been on the last 2 Wednesdays about Miami and kind of behind the scenes. And he seems like a pretty level-headed guy. Obviously it's a lot of that stuff is pretty filtered in terms of what you see. It's behind the scenes, but it's still what they choose to show you.
Yeah. But
it seems like he's sort of that steady veteran presence that you might expect from a more experienced quarterback at Miami. And, as long as he's out there and physically healthy, I think he'll be all right.
All right, moving on to topic number 2. I will say Patrick and I got into this a little bit yesterday and how we felt about this situation. So we're just going to continue that discussion, if you will. But Alabama, the number 1 preseason team in the country. I don't think that is any surprise to anybody. The reigning national champs. Yes, there are huge pieces that have to be replaced offensively, but Alabama number 1. I was pretty much unanimous when you look at the numbers. Does the game between Georgia and Clemson impact whether Alabama will be number 1 moving forward?
I would say no. I think as long as Alabama beats Miami and it's not like some 3-point game that's really close, I think Alabama's going to be number 1 until they lose or until there's a game that really makes people question where they are. Mm-hmm. And we can get into it later. I'm not sure there's a game like that on their schedule, to be honest. But I think Georgia probably has a little bit more to gain just with the way things kind of went for them last year. And now they have JT Daniels, who's, one of the favorites for the Heisman. If they can beat Clemson, then they're really in that discussion. And they don't play Alabama. They wouldn't play Alabama until the SEC title game. So you can't really lose when you don't play Alabama. That certainly helps. You don't have that opportunity to kind of get knocked off early. So maybe they're kind of sticking around as a number 2, number 3. through the year. But again, I just don't see Alabama losing that number 1 spot unless they lose.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. There are two things. Does Alabama deserve the number 1 ranking? I could go into that, but if Clemson wipes Georgia off the map, they're gonna jump them. Like, I don't see how you have the 2nd-year starter with DJ. I don't think you're gonna have Bryce Young have. I don't think you're gonna have Bryce Young have the numbers that DJ is gonna do, especially since he plays in the ACC. But more so, does Alabama deserve the number 1 ranking? I know that they like to give the defending champs the number 1 ranking. Obviously, Trevor's gone, Justin Fields is gone, so you really don't have anybody that's sticking out to you to take the number 1 ranking. But I don't like the idea that the defending national title holder gets
not only is Alabama the defending national title, the national champions, they did it in a COVID situation. Saban handled it better than any coach in the entire country. All of his players followed suit. We've continued to see them follow suit when it comes to vaccination and things like that going into this year. He's the best leader in the country when it comes to coaching college football. There is no doubt in my mind, not only because of winning the national title, but how they handled all the intangibles, going undefeated. I mean, just to be in the position that they were, there's no doubt in my mind Alabama deserved number 1 ranking, and they will be number 1 until they're proven otherwise, until someone beats them. I mean, Mike, I completely agree with you. Patrick, no disrespect, but until someone upsets the tide, if that does not happen, Alabama will roll number 1 throughout the entire
season. It's just like the playoff, though. It's the best teams, right? It's not the most deserving, right? And there's no doubt the 2020 Alabama team is one of the best teams ever. And what is that? 11 SEC teams, because you got Florida in the national or in the SEC title game. Notre Dame, Ohio State, they wiped them. I got nothing but love for the 2020 team. You can go read Joe Goodman's book on the 2020 team and how amazing that was. However, do they deserve to be number 1 now?
If they don't, who does then? I mean, put a school on there. Put some respect on it. Put a school out there.
I mean, I hate to say Clemson. Clemson's right there with them, and that's just because that's the same kind of program.
So it won't happen in a vacuum now, because even if Clemson beats Georgia this weekend, then you still have the same day. You have Alabama, potentially beating Miami, which is number 16 or number 14 in the country in the AP poll, 16 in the coaches. And if they win by what they should win by, what Vegas thinks to win by, which is like 20 points or even more than that, then, Alabama's taking care of a top 20 opponent and Clemson's taking care of a top 10 opponent. And I think you kind of wind up at the same place. And I think just to the point that Simone made too about last year, they were so much better than everybody else last year. They won by 30 points in the national championship.
But those guys are gone. Those guys are gone. They're all getting paid money and playing in the NFL.
And then you lose some guys and your bar gets a little bit lower. But since you're coming from such a high place, it's down to still a pretty high place. And I think that's probably the way people look at it, is that they're coming down to earth, but not all the way down to earth.
Sure. If there's one thing that we know for sure, and I saw the comment there a second ago from Chris Murphy, Saban does not give a rat's behind where Alabama starts the season. He cares much more about where Alabama finishes the season. Another thing that we've seen Saban really care about is his guys and what type of guys they are in terms of responsibility, in terms of discipline. And a main topic throughout this preseason, Mike, you've covered this very closely, is Jahleel Billingsley, the tight end. Let's go to topic number 3, guys. This is a very interesting situation. He's put at second, third in the depth chart. I mean, you got the slash or whatever that means, by the way, they need to work on their releasing like their Word document and a little bit of a better font. I'm not really sure if Bama doesn't know how to work WordPress, but anyway, that's beside the point. What is going on with Jahleel Billingsley and what is the future for this?
Yeah, I think they released it a minute before Saban's press conference on Monday, so we didn't really have a whole lot of time to look at it, but that's usually what happens. It's, Billingsley is something where I don't think we can say for certain what the deal is, but it's obviously safe to say that he's upset Nick Saban. I mean, I've covered this team. This is my 3rd year now. I can't remember a single player even coming close to having the sort of public,
agreed,
put on notice sort of thing that Saban has done. I think Antonio Alfano is the one other player that comes to mind. A couple years ago, he was a recruit. I mean, he hadn't even played yet. He was off the team, and Saban had some pretty tough words for him, but this is a guy who's on the team. And look, at the end of the day, I mean, Nick Saban has talked about it many times before, his whole experience at Michigan State, and the psychology professor, Dr. Rosen, that he worked with and essentially learned from him, that each player has different ways of learning or different ways of kind of getting a message to them. And this must be the way that he feels like Jaleel Billingsley needs to be coached, in a very public way, in a very aggressive way. And I think the biggest indicator of what might be the problem here is when Billingsley tweeted on Monday after that depth chart came out, something essentially along the lines of, man, like I'm the third option, with a crying emoji, almost like, woe is me, but almost in a joking sort of way. Ended up deleting the tweet. And again, it's just kind of a sign of where he might be from a maturity standpoint.
That's what I was going to say, maturity standpoint. Yeah.
Right. Where the coaching staff might view him. And every single time we've asked about him, it's kind of been the same answer from Saban. Hasn't really changed. And you wonder at what point does the message get through, or does it just not get through?
Yeah.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with like putting your laundry out. I don't think Nick Saban loves to do that anyway. So he might learn a little bit differently than other players, but is that really what's going on? You're going to the extreme when you're saying that in a press conference. You're having sharp words. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Tariq Gilbert last year, supposed to be, great at LSU. Then you go to Florida. Then you drop out of Florida before you even get on the team. Now you're at Georgia. He obviously has first round talent, I think, if you look at the tape, but it's an unfortunate situation. Hopefully he gets with the program.
I think that, as I said earlier in the show, Saban does not make mistakes. And he knows exactly what he is doing. And let it be known, this is not the first player that's acted immaturely. This is not the first player that he's had an issue with. This is not the first player. This isn't the only player right now. It's just the only player that he is handling in this way. There are guys who probably feel like they should be a different place in the depth chart. There are guys who have made mistakes during fall camp for whatever reason, and coaches handling it in a different way. For whatever reason, that we don't understand. And Mike, I think he made a great point when it comes to psychology. I mean, Saban is the ultra psychologist. The man studies it as much as he studies any offense. He knows what he's doing. He's doing it for a reason. Agree with it or not, Patrick. Listen, it's kind of tough sometimes to listen to. But if the message is not getting across, and judging by that tweet that you brought up, Mike, I didn't even know about that. It might be getting across slower than probably the Bama coaching staff would like for it to be getting across.
Right. And just because, and I agree that Saban certainly knows what he's doing. I think there's a strategy behind it for him. With that said, it doesn't mean it's going to work.
Sure.
And, there's only so much that they can do from a coaching standpoint. And like Pat said, he's first round talent, potentially. That's what he was being talked about during the offseason, and maybe that's sort of what got to him, and players listen to that stuff. And, Saban calls it rat poison. We all know that, but it only applies to certain players. That there are players like, let's say, Mac, who going into last year, people were talking about him as a high draft pick. Not that they were, but I think he would have handled it well. And some players just don't handle it well. And they sort of let it get to their head in a too positive way, and they don't work hard enough to actually back it up.
Yeah,
I agree. I agree. Saban knows what he's doing. I just feel like putting a player on blast like that is more of an NFL move. That's a professional move. These kids are still, how old is he?
They ain't kids, bro. They making money now. They ain't kids. It's fair game. It's fair game, bro. Once you start cashing the check, once you start cashing the check, man, you held to a different standard.
Is Jahleel Billingsley getting any money? You know what I'm saying?
I don't even care if he is or not. The opportunity is out there, and this is no longer the same old college.
Sure.
In my opinion, the game has changed. You're making money. This is a job. You want to get put on blast?
If anything, he's shooting himself. If anything, Billingsley is shooting himself in the foot for any future NIL deals, because people wouldn't want. But the last thing I'll say on that is Nick Saban brought up discipline with him. There is something else going on, and I can't fault someone young for going through a tough time. And if he's being spoiled, and if he's being arrogant, or feel like he's like, I need to be the number one option. I need to be the number one, because we all saw Cameron Latu in the spring game, and we're all everybody's excited to see him. I would say that you never know what is going on until you're walking in someone's shoes.
And I agree with that. Here's the thing, though. Okay, Saban knows when to put somebody out there and when not to. If this guy was dealing with something There was a difficult circumstance, something in his home life, something like that. Saban's not going to put his butt on blast nationally like that. I mean, he is not like that. Saban has.
You're certainly not going to make the roster. I can say that.
Yeah, he loves his players. He's not going to put a guy out there if
you got preach, Simone. Preach.
Thanks, Isaacs. I got somebody on my side. I don't see a lot of preach Patricks in there, but all right, guys. Our last topic, right quick. We're going to take it's way too early to be doing this. Patrick insisted. I'm not going to back down from it, and I'm okay with putting my name on this. All right, Patrick. So bring up the graphic.
I'll put my name on it too.
Let's bring out the season outlook, and again, we haven't even seen a single snap from nobody on this roster or on this schedule. But here's what we got. And Mike, I know we don't have you in there, but I would like to know how you feel about these two outlooks. Firstly, you can be like the judge of these two, and then please weigh in.
Sure. If I had to make picks for this season, I haven't done it for the entire season yet. We're doing it week by week. I would lean towards Simone's side of it. I don't see a team on there. Georgia came close last year. We'll have to see what the SEC title game will look like, but I just don't see a team right now in their schedule that has quite the firepower to beat them. Even a team like Texas A&M has a new quarterback. LSU has a new quarterback. The biggest quibble I might have would be Auburn. I know, weird things happen at Jordan-Hare. They haven't won there in 6 years now.
That's only when Gus is coaching, and that has passed.
Right.
Weird things only happen when Gus Malzahn is coaching Auburn.
I just don't see it with the first year Brian Harsin and some of the changes and turnover there's been at Auburn. I don't see that happening. Ole Miss is actually the game where I agree most with Patrick. I think that would be the dangerous game, even though it's at Bryant-Denny compared to last year. Lane Kiffin.
What about the Florida game on the road?
I am willing to defend
here's what I'm circling that's going to be the most difficult opponent. I'm looking at week 3.
Right. Florida could be tough. I think they've lost so many guys, though, that could be a tougher ask for Florida. A&M would probably be, I think, if you took a poll, what most people would say would be the toughest game. Top 10 team on the road, really tough place to play, Kyle Field. That would be, I think, the game. But again, Ole Miss is kind of the one that sneaks up on me. And when we've seen it before, 2014, 2015 seasons.
Patrick, you're getting killed in the comments.
That's cool. I see someone going, Auburn's going to be 6-6. Look, I'll defend this. And this is where it goes.
6-4.
Anyway. I get Florida. You know what? This is the thing. Florida, Texas A&M, and you go back to Clemson and Georgia. They all have new quarterbacks. I don't trust that at all. Here's the reason I think the Ole Miss game is the one that they could lose. And if they don't lose the Ole Miss game, they're not going to lose the Auburn game. I'll say that. If they go into Auburn undefeated, they'll win that. The reason the Ole Miss game is dangerous is because Lane Kiffin's dangerous, Matt Corral is dangerous, and just like LSU in 2019, I used to live in Louisiana. I watched LSU lose every single year to Alabama. You're going to beat Alabama at home. They're not going to go into Texas A&M, LSU. Nick Saban will have them ready. You're going to get surprised at home. That's how Ole Miss won last time. That's how Texas A&M won last time with Johnny Manziel. Texas A&M, everybody's saying they have a brand new quarterback who's someone compared to Johnny Manziel last night on the UAB game. I just don't see it. I see that as the upset. And then the Auburn one, if you're already coming into it, you have the one loss. Yeah, you have a playoff spot, but obviously the Iron Bowl is where crazy things can happen, and you two both know that.
Well, before we get to November and the Iron Bowl, we got to get to September 4th. And that is against Miami in Atlanta, the Chick-fil-A kickoff game. Bama spent a lot of time kicking off the season there against ranked opponents. They will again this year. Number 1, Alabama, taking on number 14, Miami. The quarterback duo, these two guys are going to be fun to watch. Can Alabama get it done in week 1? And we'll see, guys. But, hey, college football is here. It's a great time of year, and we appreciate everyone that tuned in to episode 1 of BAMANEWS. Mike Rodak, let folks know how they can follow you.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Mike Rodak, and obviously right here on AL.com.
Sweet. Patrick Greenfield as well. Patrick, excited to kick off this show with you. We'll do it every week about this time, previewing Alabama games. So, guys, we'll
appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
We'll see you here next week. Have a good one.
Not an Auburn grad, as someone tried to point out. Not even close.